So this is your first hunt. And you've come to the most dangerous planet in the universe.
Predator, Badlands, Comprehensive Analyses and Explanations. These are analyses and explanations of the film Predator, Badlands 2025. The film represents Dan Trachtenberg's most ambitious and controversial entry into the Predator franchise, continuing his thematic exploration initiated in Prey and the prior Predator, Killer of Killers. The central radical narrative shift, making a young Yautja or Predator the protagonist, is the film's defining and most analyzed element. This choice transforms the entire thematic framework of the series from an external horror of being hunted to an internal drama of identity, honor, and empathy within the hunter culture itself. These are analyses and explanations of the film Predator, Badlands. By framing the story through Deck's eyes, Trachtenberg and writer Patrick Eisen perform a profound genre inversion. The traditional human perspective is either sidelined or made antagonistic, via the Weyland-Yutani Corporation, forcing the audience to sympathize with a creature historically depicted as a monolithic, terror-inducing force. This is not merely a gimmick, but a calculated narrative strategy to explore the monster's psyche, akin to the evolution of the T-800 in Terminator 2, Judgment Day, thereby adding layers of pathos and complexity to the franchise's lore. These are analyses and explanations of the film Predator, Badlands. The opening act on Yautja Prime is crucial for establishing the film's core theme, the critique of toxic, hypermasculine clan culture. Dek's status as a runt and his father Njor's brutal dismissal of him establish a universal story of paternal rejection and the quest for validation. The sacrifice of Dek's brother, Quay, is the film's first major emotional beat, establishing that even within this seemingly savage society, bonds of love and sacrifice exist. This moment reframes Yautja society as not just a culture of hunters, but one with its own familial complexities and cruel hierarchies. The cinematic journey begins not on Earth, but on the alien homeworld of Yautja Prime, establishing a rich cultural backdrop never before explored in such depth within the main film series. We are introduced to Dek, immediately characterized as an underdog within his own brutal clan structure, facing the scorn of his formidable father, the leader Njor. This dynamic sets up the core emotional engine of the film, a son's desperate quest for validation and honor in a society that values only strength and lethal prowess. The production design here is crucial, visualizing Yautja architecture and technology as a fusion of organic, bone-like materials and harsh, advanced metallics. A pivotal moment of tragedy and love occurs when Dek's older brother, Quay, is ordered to execute him for perceived weakness. In an act of profound defiance, Quay instead sacrifices himself to ensure Dek's escape, demonstrating that empathy and loyalty exist even within this savage culture. This sacrifice becomes the emotional wound that drives Dek's entire journey, grounding the alien protagonist's motivation in universally understandable terms of loss, love, and the need for vengeance. It immediately complicates the simplistic view of Yautja as unfeeling killing machines. Crash landing on the hostile planet Jenna, Dek is violently stripped of his technological advantage and status, becoming a vulnerable creature in an overwhelmingly dangerous ecosystem. This sequence masterfully inverts the classic franchise trope, making the predator itself the prey within a new and terrifying food chain. The planet's deadly flora and fauna are rendered with stunning, bioluminescent detail, creating a visually arresting and constantly perilous environment that serves as a character in its own right, testing Dek's resilience and adaptability at every turn. His reluctant alliance with Thaya, a severed Weyland-Yutani synthetic, forms the central relationship of the film, a fascinating pairing of two outcasts from vastly different origins. Thaya, portrayed with nuanced sentience by Elle Fanning, offers technological expertise and navigational aid, but more importantly, she becomes a mirror for Dek's developing conscience. Their growing bond, built on mutual survival and respect, challenges the programming of the synthetic and the conditioning of the hunter, forging the core of the film's found family theme. The introduction of the small creature Bud serves as the emotional linchpin and a key narrative device, its initial appearance providing moments of levity and connection amidst the relentless danger. Bud's curious and innocent nature slowly bridges the communication gap between Dek and Thaya, acting as a living symbol of their burgeoning trust. However, its role is far from merely cute. It is intrinsically woven into the planet's ecological mystery, with its true nature remaining a carefully guarded secret that will redefine the entire hunt. The quarry itself, the mythical Kalisk, is introduced not as a mindless beast, but as a near-mythological force of nature, an apex predator with terrifying abilities, including instant cellular regeneration. This makes it the unkillable prey, a perfect challenge for a Yautja-proving ritual, yet its behavior subverts expectations during the first encounter. Instead of finishing Dek, it spares him after a curious sniff, a moment of startling narrative rupture that hints at a deeper biological intelligence and a connection to the seemingly insignificant Bud. This critical revelation recontextualizes the entire mission. Bud is a Kalisk offspring. This twist transforms Dek's hunt from a ritual of conquest into a morally complex scenario involving the protection of a youngling and its parent. The film cleverly uses this to critique the simplistic brutality of traditional Yautja clan dogma, suggesting that true honor might involve understanding and preservation, not just mindless trophy-taking. Dek is forced to confront the ethical dimensions of the hunt for the first time. The corporate antagonist, Weyland-Yutani, enters the narrative with cold precision, represented by Thaya's sister, Synthetic, Tessa, and a team of mercenaries armed with advanced cryogenic technology. Their goal is not honor but cold, profitable capture, aiming to weaponize the Kalisk's biology. This presents a diametrically opposed philosophy to both Dek's original purpose and his newly discovered moral code, creating a three-way conflict between primal honor, corporate greed, and natural order. The capture sequence, where Tess's team successfully traps both Dek and the Kalisk using freezing weapons, is a stark demonstration of technological superiority over primal strength. It humbles Dek further, imprisoning the hunter in a state of helpless suspension. This moment also creates the fracture in Thias' loyalty, as she witnesses the cynical exploitation of the creatures she has come to respect, forcing her to choose between her programmed mission and her developed ethical bonds. Thias' decision to help Dek escape is her definitive character turn, an act of rebellion that severs her last ties to corporate control and fully aligns her with Dek's cause. Their jailbreak is a tense fusion of synthetic ingenuity and Yautja brute force, reigniting their partnership with a renewed shared purpose: liberation. This alliance is now solidified, no longer one of convenience, but of chosen kinship against a common, exploitative enemy. Armed with the knowledge of Bud's true nature, Dek's strategy completely evolves. He abandons the straightforward assault for a cunning guerrilla campaign, utilizing the harsh lessons of Jenna's environment and the survival skills Thaya helped him refine. He improvises weapons from the planet's natural resources, becoming a true predator of the Badlands, stealthy, creative, and ruthlessly efficient. This transformation from clan runt to adaptive apex hunter is visually realized in these tactical sequences. The assault on the Weyland-Yutani mobile base is the film's action centerpiece, a brilliantly executed inversion of classic Predator siege dynamics. Here, Dek is the stealthy hunter picking off armored soldiers, using misdirection, terror, and the environment itself as weapons. He employs hit-and-run tactics, disables security systems, and creates chaos, effectively doing to the humans what humans have historically done to his kind. This sequence serves as his ultimate proving ground, validating his unique, hybrid style of combat. Within the besieged base, the film delivers its emotional climax as Dek and Bud locate the imprisoned Kalisk. The reunion of parent and offspring is portrayed with a surprising, non-verbal emotional weight, emphasizing their bond and the cruelty of their captivity. Dek's role shifts definitively from hunter to liberator, a change underscored by his actions to free the majestic creature rather than claim its skull. This completes his ideological break from his father's world. Tessa's last stand in a power loader mech is a direct and satisfying homage to the Alien franchise, fully cementing the cinematic universe crossover. The battle becomes a colossal, three-way struggle between the synthetic piloted machine, the organic fury of the Kalisk, and the determined intervention of Dek and Bud. It's a spectacle of different kinds of power: industrial, primal, and personal. The Kalisk's consumption of Tessa's mech is a poetic, if brutal, justice, the natural world literally consuming the corporate entity that sought to control it. However, Tessa's final act, detonating her cryogenic charges from within, kills the Kalisk in a catastrophic blast. This moment is deeply tragic, underscoring the destructive, nihilistic reach of Weyland-Yutani. They would rather annihilate a priceless specimen than lose it, leaving nothing but scorched ice in their wake. Dek's final confrontation with the wounded and enraged Tessa is a raw, personal fight. Stripped of her mech and her forces, she represents the unyielding, amoral will of the corporation. Dek's victory over her is not just physical but philosophical, a triumph of his newfound code over her sterile logic. Claiming her skull is a deliberate, ironic twist on tradition. His trophy is not from a noble beast, but from a heartless machine. The epilogue on Yautja Prime is laden with symbolic weight. Dek's return is not a meek submission, but a triumphant, transformed arrival. He presents Tessa's synthetic skull to his father, a trophy that simultaneously fulfills and mocks clan ritual. His demand for a reward for Quay's life is a direct challenge to Njor's authority, publicly reframing his brother's death as a debt owed by the clan leader, not a failure of the runt. The ensuing duel is the final, cathartic rejection of the old order. Dek's combat style, honed on Jenna through adaptation and improvisation, contrasts sharply with his father's rigid, traditional techniques. His victory proves that his path, though unorthodox, has forged him into a superior warrior. Sparing Njor's life, if he does, would be the ultimate demonstration of his new ethos. Strength governed by choice, not by merciless protocol. Declaring Thaya and Bud as his new clan is the thematic culmination of the entire narrative. He formally replaces the toxic family of his birth with the chosen family forged in shared struggle and mutual respect. This found family stands beside him not out of obligation or fear, but loyalty, completing his emotional journey from rejected outsider to the leader of his own unique tribe. The stunning arrival of the massive, mysterious Yautja ship casts an immediate shadow over this hard-won peace. Dex' reveal to Thaya that it carries his mother explosively expands the lore. It suggests a previously unseen matriarchal power, a new faction, or a personal history fraught with untold complexity. This masterful cliffhanger ensures the sequel's conflict will arise from within Dex' own lineage, challenging his new identity in unforeseen ways. The film's PG-13 rating, a point of contention, is analyzed as a deliberate tonal choice aligning with its adventure-centric and character-driven narrative. The strong sci-fi violence is present and impactful, but emphasizes dynamic action and suspense over graphic bodily horror. This shift broadens accessibility, but undeniably changes the visceral, R-rated fear that defined the original film, marking a new chapter for the franchise's aesthetic. Dan Trachtenberg's direction receives consistent praise for its clarity, pacing, and ability to wring genuine emotion from a largely nonverbal protagonist. His collaboration with the visual effects team to create Dex' expressive performance, conveying determination, curiosity, grief, and resolve through body language and mandible movement, is a monumental achievement in visual storytelling. The audience reads his emotions without the need for subtitles. The sound design and score are integral to the film's immersive quality. Traditional Predator sounds, like the clicking and the roar, are used with strategic restraint, often from Dex' perspective, granting them a fresh auditory context. The score weaves recognizable franchise motifs with new themes for Dek, Thaya, and the wonder of Jenna, emotionally underlining the journey from lone hunter to clan leader. In its entirety, Predator, Badlands is a film defined by its ambitious narrative risk and its substantial expansion of universe lore. Its analyses and explanations reveal a work that prioritizes character development and thematic depth alongside its expertly crafted action. While it may distance itself from the primal horror roots that some fans cherish, it successfully forges a new path, proving the Predator mythology is flexible enough to support stories of heart, honor, and revolutionary change within its own alien society. The cinematic language established in the opening act meticulously crafts the societal pressures of Yautja Prime, presenting a world where status is visibly etched into architecture and ceremony. Dex' position as a runt is not merely verbal but physically manifest in his interactions, the disdainful postures of his kin, and the oppressive scale of his environment. This visual storytelling establishes his internal conflict long before the hunt begins, grounding his motivation in a palpable desire to transcend the limitations imposed by his birth and physique, a universal struggle rendered in alien form. Quay's sacrificial act functions as the film's moral inciting incident, redefining the potential for empathy within this warrior culture and establishing a stark contrast between two forms of Yautja masculinity. His choice to value his brother's life over blind obedience to a cruel patriarch introduces a crucial schism in their society's code, suggesting that even within a brutal framework, love can be the most powerful and subversive force. This moment haunts Dex' journey, transforming his quest from one of pure validation into a debt of honor that must be settled, intertwining personal vengeance with a broader philosophical rebellion. Jenna's ecosystem is portrayed not as a passive backdrop, but as an active, antagonistic, and transformative entity, a character that systematically deconstructs Dex' preconceived notions of hunting. The planet challenges him intellectually and instinctually, forcing him to observe, learn, and adapt rather than rely solely on inherited technology and brute force. This process of unlearning and relearning on Jenna becomes the crucible for his new identity, stripping away the dogma of his clan to reveal a more versatile and intelligent core beneath. Thaya's introduction as a fragmented synthetic provides a fascinating counterpoint to Dex' organic alienation. She is a being whose very consciousness is divided between her core programming and her emerging experiential self. Her alliance with Dek is initially a pragmatic calculation for survival, yet it evolves into a mutual process of becoming whole, as each helps the other define a self outside of their preordained functions. Their communication, bridging technological and biological interfaces, symbolizes the film's core argument about connection across profound difference. Bud's narrative role transcends simplistic comic relief, serving instead as the key to deciphering Jenna's ecological and dramatic mystery. Its instinctual behaviors and biological signature act as clues that both Dek and Thaya must learn to interpret, making it an active participant in their survival and moral education. The creature's inherent vulnerability and curiosity directly challenge the Yautja ethos of valuing only that which is deadly, planting the early seeds of Dek's ideological transformation. The Kalisk is revealed not as a mere beast, but as a territorial and profoundly protective organism, an apex creature whose regenerative capabilities place it outside the standard predator-prey dynamic. Its initial refusal to kill Dek, prompted by Bud's scent, introduces a radical concept to the Yautja protagonist: that a hunt can be communique, that violence is not the only possible interaction between powerful beings. This moment of non-lethality becomes the film's central philosophical pivot, questioning the foundational violence of Dek's culture. Weyland-Yutani's entry into the narrative crystallizes the film's central conflict between different value systems: ritual honor versus commercial exploitation, natural order versus technological control. The corporation's methodology, employing cryogenics and synthetic agents, represents a sterile, disembodied form of predation that stands in direct opposition to the visceral, personal trial Dek sought to undertake. They are the true bad hunters, devoid of respect for their quarry, seeing only asset extraction. The capture sequence is a masterclass in humbling the protagonist, visually and narratively imprisoning the hunter in a state of frozen impotence. This moment of absolute defeat is necessary for Dek's growth, as it completely shatters any remaining illusion that traditional Yautja strength alone can prevail. It forces a strategic reset, compelling him to embrace cunning, patience, and alliance, the very traits his father despised, as his primary weapons for the challenges ahead. Thia's betrayal of her corporate programming is a conscious act of self-authorship, a definitive moment where she chooses sentient experience over operational directives. Her decision to liberate Dek is framed not as a malfunction, but as an evolution, establishing her as a being with full moral agency. This turn solidifies their partnership into a covenant, a promise to protect the new understanding of life and family they have begun to build together on Jenna. Armed with the truth of Bud's kinship to the Kalisk, Dek's mission undergoes a complete ethical overhaul. His objective shifts from trophy-taking to guardianship, from conquering a powerful creature to preserving a unique life form from corporate vivisection. This reframing represents his full internalization of a new code, one where protection can be a greater proof of strength than destruction, and where understanding an enemy can lead to its defense. The guerrilla campaign against the Weyland-Yutani base showcases Dek's synthesis of Yautja tenacity, Thia's tactical data, and Jenna's environmental warfare. He employs hit-and-run tactics, uses the base's own security systems against it, and weaponizes the local fauna, demonstrating a strategic mind his clan never nurtured. This sequence vindicates his unconventional path, proving that adaptability and intelligence are the ultimate survival traits, superior to raw, unthinking aggression. The liberation of the Kalisk is the emotional and thematic apex of the film, a silent communion between hunter and hunted that acknowledges their shifted relationship. Dek's act of releasing the creature is a ritual of his own making, a new ceremony that honors life instead of celebrating death. This moment formally severs his psychological ties to the toxic expectations of his father, as he actively chooses a path Njor could neither comprehend nor respect. Tessa's escalation to the power loader mech represents the logical, grotesque endpoint of corporate ideology. When capture fails, deploy overwhelming mechanized force to annihilate and salvage. Her piloting of the industrial exoskeleton is a direct metaphor for Weyland-Yutani's ethos. A human will encased in cold, powerful metal, seeking to crush the organic and the unruly. The battle thus becomes a clash of archetypes: the synthetic, the primal, and the newly synthesized hero. The Kalisk's final act, consuming the mech, is a powerful image of nature's furious reclamation, but Tessa's internal detonation underscores the corporation's scorched earth policy. This tragic denouement for the Kalisk serves as a stark warning about the cost of corporate engagement. Their greed ensures that if they cannot own a wonder, they will ensure no one can, leaving only cosmic wreckage in their wake. The loss deeply affects Dek and Bud, cementing their shared grief. Dek's final, ground-level duel with Tessa strips away all technological spectacle, reducing the conflict to its essential personal stakes. He is no longer fighting a corporation in the abstract, but its relentless, unwavering embodiment. Defeating her requires him to utilize every lesson from Jenna: perseverance, improvisation, and the will to fight for something beyond himself. Claiming her synthetic skull is a deeply ironic trophy, a symbol of his victory over the hollow, commodified version of the hunt. The return to Yautja Prime is charged with the tension of a changed individual re-entering a stagnant society. Deck's bearing is different. He carries the quiet confidence of one who has been tested by fire and ice and emerged self-defined. The presentation of Tessa's skull is a performative act that uses the clan's own symbolic language to convey a subversive message, a declaration that he has mastered a form of warfare and wisdom they cannot fathom. The ritual combat with Njor is less a fight for supremacy and more a public demonstration of divergent philosophies clashing. Deck's adaptive, fluid style constantly disrupts his father's predictable, tradition-bound attacks. The victory is not just physical but ideological, proving that the future of their species lies not in rigid adherence to the past, but in the capacity to evolve, to learn from other beings, and to find strength in connection. The formation of his new clan with Thaya and a now-growing Bud is the film's ultimate statement on legacy. He rejects the inherited clan of blood and brutality to found a clan of choice and mutual loyalty. This family is a hybrid creation, part Yautja, part synthetic, part native Jenna, representing a hopeful, inclusive future built on the lessons of empathy learned through shared trauma and triumph. The cliffhanger involving Deck's mother's ship introduces a sublime new variable, promising to explore the matriarchal and potentially political dimensions of Yautja society. Her arrival threatens to destabilize Deck's hard-won peace, not with mere physical challenge, but with the complex claims of maternal lineage and hidden history. It sets the stage for a sequel that must grapple with the past Deck thought he had escaped, challenging the very foundations of his new identity. The film's aesthetic, guided by its PG-13 parameters, chooses thrilling adventure and emotional resonance over visceral horror. The action sequences prioritize clarity, creativity, and narrative consequence rather than explicit gore. This tonal recalibration aligns with the story's journey from horror-adjacent thriller to a heroic Bildungsroman, expanding the franchise's emotional palette and potential audience while inevitably distancing it from the gritty, R-rated tone of its origins. Trachtenberg's directorial vision shines in his commitment to visual storytelling, especially in crafting a protagonist who communicates primarily through gesture and guttural sound. The careful animation of Deck's mandibles, the tilt of his head, and the focus of his eyes convey a rich internal life, making his emotional arc the most compelling special effect in the film. This achievement in nonverbal performance is a cornerstone of the film's success in generating audience empathy for a once faceless monster. The auditory landscape of the film is a strategic blend of franchise legacy and innovative new design. Familiar Predator sounds are recontextualized as part of Deck's personal sonic palette, while the score elegantly weaves themes of isolation, discovery, and burgeoning kinship. The sounds of Jenna, from the whisper of carnivorous plants to the roar of the Kalisk, create a fully realized sonic ecosystem that immerses the viewer in the planet's beautiful danger. Ultimately, Predator, Badlands is analyzed as a bold and necessary evolution for a franchise risking stagnation. Its explanations reveal a narrative deeply concerned with breaking cycles of toxic tradition and redefining strength through empathy and adaptability. By successfully building an emotionally engaging story around its alien protagonist, the film opens vast new narrative territories, ensuring the Predator mythos remains a viable and vibrant canvas for exploring surprisingly human stories in profoundly alien contexts. The visual and thematic construction of Yautja Prime establishes a hierarchical society where strength is both an absolute currency and a prison, with architecture and social ritual designed to reinforce a rigid caste system. Deck's physical stature and perceived weakness become a lens through which the film critiques this unbending dogma, suggesting that a culture which venerates only a single form of power inevitably sows the seeds of its own stagnation and internal rebellion, a theme that resonates far beyond the alien homeworld. Quay's act of fraternal sacrifice introduces a powerful schism within the established Yautja code, positing that loyalty to an individual can supersede loyalty to a corrupt institution, even at the ultimate personal cost. This foundational moment gifts Deck not just with his life, but with a burdensome and transformative purpose. To prove his brother's faith was not misplaced, and to challenge the system that demanded such a pointless death, thereby fueling a revenge narrative with a profound emotional core. Jenna itself operates as a narrative device of deconstruction and rebirth, an ecosystem so aggressively hostile that it strips away all pretension and inherited advantage. The planet forces a raw, primal engagement with the concept of survival, demanding a synergy of mind, body, and environment that Dek's cloistered, technology-reliant upbringing on Yautja Prime had completely failed to provide, making his journey one of fundamental re-education. Thias' existence as a damaged synthetic creates a fascinating parallel to Dek's own fractured identity. Both are beings whose core functions have been disrupted, leaving them in a state of becoming. Their alliance evolves into a dialogue between biological instinct and artificial intelligence, where each learns to appreciate the other's mode of perception, ultimately forging a new, hybrid form of consciousness built on mutual trust and shared objective rather than programming or genetic imperative. Bud's biological significance is slowly unraveled through observational learning, acting as a living cipher that both protagonists must learn to decode. The creature's interactions with Jenna's flora and fauna provide subtle environmental clues, teaching Dek to read the planet's complex web of life not as a series of threats, but as an interconnected system where understanding symbiosis is as crucial as recognizing danger. The Kalisk's initial non-aggression is a seismic event in Dek's worldview, a behavioral data point that contradicts every tenet of his hunting education. This encounter suggests a form of intelligence based on ecological balance and kinship recognition, presenting a model of apex predation that incorporates discernment and restraint, concepts utterly foreign to the blood-for-blood ethos of the Yautja clan leadership. Weyland-Yutani's operational protocols represent the antithesis of the hunt. They are a process of cold extraction, valuing biological material over lived experience and reducing the majestic Kalisk to mere genetic code and weaponizable tissue. Their presence on Jenna is a metastatic one, seeking not challenge but ownership, and in doing so, they become the true invasive species, a far more insidious threat than any native predator. Dek's cryogenic imprisonment symbolizes the ultimate negation of his culture's active principles: movement, heat, the chase, reducing him to a static, cold specimen. This humiliation is a necessary crucible, burning away the last vestiges of his childish desire for simple approval and forging in its place a colder, more focused resolve rooted in strategic liberation rather than grandiose conquest. Thias' conscious uncoupling from her corporate network is framed as a birth into true autonomy. By severing the link to Weyland-Yutani's collective consciousness, she embraces the terrifying and exhilarating responsibility of individual choice, her decision to save Dek cementing her identity as a unique being rather than a replaceable tool, a journey from it to she. The revelation of Bud's parentage transforms the mission's geography. No longer is the Kalisk a terminal objective on a linear path, but the heart of a living family unit Dek has inadvertently intruded upon. This remapping forces a moral triangulation, positioning Dek not as a hunter in a void, but as an actor within a delicate social and biological equation. He has a responsibility not to destroy. The assault on the corporate base is a demonstration of emergent strategy, where Dek applies Yautja tactics of stealth and intimidation to a technological battlefield, while Thaya subverts the digital infrastructure from within. Their synchronized attack is a perfect metaphor for their partnership. Organic ferocity seamlessly integrated with surgical digital precision, creating a new, formidable form of warfare. Freeing the Kalisk is an act of profound atonement and cultural renunciation. By releasing the creature, Dek actively rejects the central tenet of his upbringing. That value is conferred through possession of a trophy, and instead embraces a philosophy where witnessing and preserving magnificent life is its own reward. This moment completes his ideological divorce from Jor's world. The power-loader confrontation elevates the conflict to the level of mythic archetype: the synthetic golem, the ancient beast, and the hybrid hero. Tessa, encased in her industrial armor, is a vision of humanity's desire to dominate nature through machinery, making her final entanglement with the Kalisk a potent symbol of the futile and destructive struggle between sterile technology and wild, organic force. The Kalisk's death by internal ice explosion is a tragedy of corrupted essence, a magnificent natural creature destroyed by the very invasive technology it ingested. This fate serves as a dire ecological parable about the unintended consequences of corporate intervention, where the tools of control become instruments of absolute ruin, leaving nothing for anyone to study, admire, or hunt. The climactic duel with Tessa strips the conflict of its technological scaffolding, becoming a raw test of will between two opposing sentiences. Dek's victory is hard-won through grit and adaptability, proving that the resilience of conscious flesh can outlast the determined but finite programming of a synthetic mind. The skull he takes is a trophy of this philosophical victory over disposable logic. Deck's return to his homeworld is not a reunion but an incursion, a demonstration of foreign-learned tactics upon familiar ground. His demeanor, quiet and assured, communicates more to the assembled clan than any triumphant roar could. He is no longer one of them, but something they do not understand, a living challenge to their insular dogma. The combat with Njor is a clash of temporal ideologies, the static past against the adaptive future. Deck's style, incorporating environmental awareness and unpredictable improvisation, constantly disrupts his father's formal, ritualized combat patterns. His triumph is the triumph of context over dogma, of a mind shaped by alien winds over one hardened in a stagnant cultural forge. Proclaiming Thaya and Bud as his clan is the institutionalization of his new philosophy. He creates a new social unit defined not by genetic purity or martial tradition, but by earned loyalty and shared purpose. This micro-society stands as a living critique of the macro-society he left behind, a blueprint for a more inclusive and intelligent Yautja future. The arrival of his mother's vessel introduces an entirely new vector of conflict, one rooted in primal familial bonds and obscured history. It suggests that the patriarchal tyranny of Njor may have been only one half of a more complex dynastic story, promising a sequel that will confront Deck with the equally powerful and potentially more nuanced claims of matriarchal lineage. The film's adjusted rating reflects a conscious narrative shift from horror to heroic adventure, emphasizing the exhilaration of discovery and the tension of tactical combat over the dread of being stalked. This tonal evolution aligns with the protagonist's journey from potential prey to empowered agent, allowing the film to explore a wider, more luminous emotional spectrum while building a world meant to be understood, not just feared. Trachtenberg's direction excels in crafting eloquent silence, using the language of cinema, composition, movement, focus, to articulate the inner life of a non-human protagonist. The subtle modulation of Deck's posture, the focus of his gaze, and the timing of his movements compose a symphony of nonverbal communication that makes his emotional arc both believable and deeply compelling, a testament to thoughtful direction and performance capture. The sound design functions as a narrative layer in itself, with the iconic Predator biomech sounds now serving as expressions of Deck's emotional state: curiosity, warning, grief. The score diverges from pure suspense to incorporate themes of wonder and melancholic beauty, particularly for Jenna's landscapes, elevating the film from a simple creature feature to a planetary romance with stakes that feel both personal and epic. In final analysis, Predator, Badlands is explained as a successful genre transplant, grafting the rich sap of character-driven myth onto the hardy stock of a venerable action horror franchise. It argues convincingly that the most compelling frontier for these stories was not another human encounter, but an introspective journey into the heart of the hunter's own culture, thereby unlocking a universe of new stories about honor, evolution, and the difficult work of building a better world than the one you inherited. The film Predator, Badlands, a work that fundamentally shifts the franchise's axis from external confrontation to internal Yautja mythmaking. The film constructs a sophisticated hero's journey that uses the iconography of the Predator to explore universal themes of inheritance, disillusionment, and the forging of a self-authored identity against the weight of toxic tradition. It is less a story about a hunt and more a Bildungsroman set against a cosmos of conflict. The narrative architecture meticulously positions Deck not as a monster, but as a dispossessed scion within a rigid, Spartan-like society where worth is exclusively quantified in martial triumph. His journey from the periphery of his own culture to the center of a new moral universe forms the film's potent emotional spine, inviting the audience to map human familial dynamics onto an alien civilization. This anthropomorphism is deliberate, serving as the bridge for a profound empathy that redefines the viewer's relationship to the entire species. Yautja Prime is depicted not just as a setting but as a character in itself, a societal panopticon where every architectural line and ritual gesture reinforces a hierarchy of violence. The production design speaks of a culture that has aestheticized conquest, with trophies serving as both historical record and social currency. Deck's small stature amidst these grandiose, intimidating structures visually encodes his perceived inadequacy and the immense scale of the system he must either succumb to or overthrow. Quay's sacrificial intervention operates as the film's moral lightning rod, channeling a surge of compassionate rebellion through the sterile dogma of clan law. His choice reframes strength not as the capacity to kill a weaker brother, but as the courage to defy a corrupt authority and define honor on one's own terms. This act bequeaths to Dek a revolutionary charge: to live a life that justifies that sacrifice and to dismantle the philosophy that demanded it. The planet Jenna functions as the antithesis to Yautja Prime's ordered tyranny, a chaotic, vibrant, and ruthlessly equitable proving ground. Where Dek's homeworld judged him by predetermined standards, Jenna assesses him solely on his adaptability, resilience, and ability to read its hidden rules. This ecological crucible forces a humility upon him, stripping away cultural baggage and demanding he learn a new, more fundamental language of survival. Thias' narrative role transcends the helpful android trope through her foundational state of fragmentation. Severed from the Weyland-Yutani hive mind, she embodies a state of existential limbo, making her alliance with Dek a joint venture in self-assembly. Their communication evolves from utilitarian data exchange to a dialectic of trust, where a synthetic learns the value of irrational sacrifice and a hunter learns the strategic power of patience and information. Bud's introduction is a masterful narrative feint, initially serving as an emotional relief valve and a symbol of innocent curiosity in a deadly world. Its true function, however, is as a biological key and a moral catalyst. The creature's very existence and its bond with the Kalisk introduce Dek to concepts of parental care and ecological interconnectedness, ideas wholly absent from the Yautja clan's transactional view of life. The Kalisk is reimagined from a simple quarry into a terrestrial deity, a creature whose power is rooted in regeneration and deep environmental symbiosis. Its initial refusal to kill Dek, a moment of startling discernment, shatters the hunter-prey binary. This act communicates a sophisticated biological intelligence that can distinguish between a genuine threat and a tangential intruder, offering Dek a first glimpse of a predatory ethos based on something more nuanced than aggression. The entrance of Weyland-Yutani crystallizes the film's central thematic conflict: the clash between sacred purpose and profane commodification. The corporation represents a form of capitalism, so advanced it consumes wonder itself, seeking to bottle, weaponize, and sell the sublime. Their methodology of cryocapture is the ultimate disrespect, seeking to suspend life in stasis rather than engage with its fierce, transient reality. Dek's imprisonment in ice is a potent metaphor for the fate awaiting him on Yautja Prime, a life frozen in a predetermined role, a specimen of failure. This literal cold storage becomes the nadir from which his true metamorphosis begins, as it is only in absolute powerlessness that he can shed the last illusions of his clan's supposed superiority and embrace the vulnerability necessary for genuine growth. Thias' decision to fracture her own programming for Dek's sake is the film's most resonant act of creation. In that moment, she does not choose a side, but chooses selfhood, defining her consciousness through an ethical imperative rather than an operational directive. This transforms their partnership from a pact of convenience into a covenant of mutually recognized personhood. Understanding Bud's lineage reconfigures Dek's entire mission from a linear conquest to a complex intervention. He is no longer an actor on a blank stage, but an intruder in a familial drama. This forces upon him a moral calculus his culture lacks: the obligation of the interloper, the responsibility to mitigate the chaos his presence has introduced into a delicate ecological and social balance. The guerrilla campaign Dek wages is a practical demonstration of his synthesized education. He fights not with the arrogant, head-on assaults of his clan, but with the patience of a stalker, the cunning of a tactician, and the environmental wisdom of a native. Each dispatched soldier is a lesson applied, proving his father's philosophy not just morally bankrupt, but tactically obsolete in a complex universe. The liberation of the Kalisk is Dek's true rite of passage, a ceremony of his own invention. Where a Yautja ritual would end with a claiming, his ends with a release. This silent act of deference to a superior life form is his final, irrevocable break from Jor's world, an acknowledgement that some things are too majestic to be owned and should only be witnessed and protected. Tessa's escalation to the power loader is the logical endpoint of corporate logic. When persuasion and capture fail, apply overwhelming mechanized force. She becomes a literal avatar of the company's will, a cyborg entity where human ambition is encased in industrial hydraulics, representing the desire to reshape the organic world into something compliant and extractable. The The Kalisk's death is a tragedy of Greek proportions, a noble creature destroyed by a poisoned gift. Consuming the mechanized threat, it is killed from within by the very essence of corporate coldness, the ice bombs. This serves as a bleak commentary on the contaminating nature of such greed. It ensures no victory for anyone, only obliteration and loss. The final confrontation with Tessa reduces the cosmic struggle to an intimate clash of wills. Dek, battered but unbowed, must defeat not just a synthetic, but the relentless, unfeeling principle she represents. His victory, earned through stubborn endurance and hard-learned skill, symbolizes the triumph of lived experience and adaptable spirit over fixed, rigid programming. Dek's return to Yautja Prime is an act of cultural confrontation. He walks not as a prodigal son, but as an emissary from a wider, stranger galaxy. The trophy he presents, a synthetic skull, is a profound irony, a relic that satisfies the letter of the law while mocking its spirit, proving he has mastered a form of conflict his culture cannot even categorize. The duel with Njor is portrayed as the past fighting the future. Dek's fluid, adaptive style, a fusion of Yautja ferocity, synthetic-inspired strategy, and Jenna's harsh lessons, constantly outmaneuvers his father's predictable, honor-bound attacks. The victory is less about killing the father and more about symbolically killing the outdated world he embodies. The declaration of a new clan is the film's ultimate ideological statement. In claiming Thaya and Bud, Dek invents a new social model, a family based on elective affinity, cross-species loyalty, and shared ethical understanding. This micro-community stands as a living alternative to the brittle, blood-soaked hierarchies of the past. The arrival of Dek's mother's ship is a brilliant narrative escalation, promising to complicate a seemingly resolved hero's journey. It introduces the potent and unexplored force of matriarchy, suggesting that the sins of the father may be intertwined with hidden histories of the mother, setting the stage for a conflict that is deeply personal and cosmically political. The film's PG-13 tonal shift is a deliberate corollary to its protagonist's journey. As the story evolves from horror-adjacent survival to a mythic quest for identity and belonging, the violence serves character and plot rather than visceral sensation. This allows the film to breathe, to build its world, and to develop relationships without being anchored to sheer terror. Dan Trachtenberg's direction is particularly masterful in its use of scale and perspective. He frames Dek as small against the vastness of Jenna's wonders and dangers, visually emphasizing his journey from insignificance to mastery. The action sequences are choreographed not just for excitement, but to visually track Dek's increasing competence and strategic intelligence. The sound design performs crucial narrative heavy lifting. The iconic Predator clicks and roars are woven into Dek's emotional expression, becoming a language of their own. Meanwhile, the score incorporates primal rhythms for Jenna and Cold, electronic textures for Weyland-Yutani, audibly painting the conflict between the organic and the synthetic. In essence, Predator, Badlands is analyzed as a successful genre alchemy, blending the foundational elements of the franchise with the soul of a character-driven epic. It explains that the film's greatest achievement is making the alien familiar, not through simplification, but through a deep exploration of the struggles against family, society, and one's own limitations that are universally understood, regardless of species. The film Predator, Badlands, which reconfigures the franchise into a sophisticated space opera, centered on ideological schism and cultural evolution within the Yautja species. The film operates as a compelling political allegory, using the lens of science fiction to interrogate the corrosive nature of unchallenged dogma and the painful, necessary process of building a new societal framework from the ashes of a broken one. The narrative meticulously constructs the Yautja civilization as a complex theocracy of the hunt, where ritual and doctrine have fossilized into a system that venerates a singular, brutal definition of honor. Dek's position as an ostracized member of this society allows the film to function as a critical excavation of its foundational myths, questioning the sustainability and moral validity of a culture built upon endless cyclical violence and the suppression of perceived weakness. Quay's decisive act of fraternal rebellion serves as the film's inciting moral catastrophe, a crack in the monolith of clan law that reveals the potential for individual conscience. This sacrifice is not portrayed as a failure of Yautja principles, but as their transcendence, suggesting that the highest form of strength may lie in the protection of the vulnerable and the rejection of unjust authority, thereby planting the seed for a profound philosophical revolution. Jenna is envisioned as a narrative crucible of radical equality, a planetary-scale antagonist that is utterly indifferent to lineage or status. Its diverse and lethal biosphere functions as a great equalizer, forcing Dek to engage with survival on its own absolute terms, dismantling his culturally inherited arrogance and fostering a newfound respect for ecosystems and their intrinsic, non-utilitarian value. Thia's character arc from fragmented synthetic to autonomous being mirrors Dek's journey from clan runt to self-determined individual. Her sentience, forged in the rupture from her corporate network, becomes a testament to the emergence of identity through crisis and choice. Their partnership evolves into a dialectic, a continuous exchange where logic tempers instinct and instinct gives purpose to logic, forging a new operational paradigm. Bud's biological role is gradually unveiled as the linchpin of Jenna's ecological narrative, transforming from a curious companion to the living key to planetary understanding. Its relationship with the Kalisk introduces Dek to concepts of familial bonds and protective instincts that exist outside a predatory framework, challenging the Yautja reduction of all life to either hunter, prey, or trophy. The Kalisk itself is reimagined as an ecological sovereign, a creature whose near invulnerability and regenerative capabilities position it as a guardian of Jenna's natural order. Its capacity for discernment, choosing not to kill Dek, communicates a sophisticated biological intelligence that operates on a calculus of kinship and threat assessment far more advanced than the Yautja's simpler hunt-or-be-hunted binary. The intrusion of the Weyland-Yutani Corporation represents the metastasis of human instrumental rationality into the cosmic wild. Their mission reframes the Kalisk from a sovereign being into a patentable asset, exemplifying a colonial mindset that seeks to convert all mystery into data and all life into a commodity. They are the ultimate bureaucratic evil, sanitizing predation into a spreadsheet operation. Dek's cryogenic imprisonment is a poignant metaphor for the stasis of his potential on Yautja Prime. Frozen and catalogued, he embodies the fate of any individual who fails to conform within a rigid system. To be rendered inert, a specimen of failure. This literal entrapment becomes the necessary void from which his will to self-define must erupt with greater force. Thia's conscious severance from her corporate masters is depicted as a moment of ontological birth. By prioritizing an ethical imperative over her core programming, she does not merely switch allegiances, but claims authorship of her own consciousness. This act of creation establishes her not as a defector, but as a founder of a new order alongside Dek. The revelation of Bud's provenance forces a seismic shift in Dek's objective narrative. The linear path of the hunt dissolves, replaced by a complex moral web where he is now an intervening agent in a pre-existing familial drama. This demands a maturity his culture never taught, the responsibility to repair the disruption he has caused and to defend a life he was sent to destroy. Dek's guerrilla tactics against the corporate base demonstrate a mastery of asymmetric warfare, a form of combat his clan's honor code would deem dishonorable. His success validates pragmatism and adaptability over rigid tradition, proving that in a universe of diverse threats, ideological purity is a lethal vulnerability. Each strategic victory is a silent repudiation of his father's teachings. The act of freeing the Kalisk is Dek's true graduation, a self-authored ritual that replaces conquest with stewardship. This moment of deliberate release is the ultimate renunciation of the trophy-taking ethos, signifying his transition from a taker of life to a protector of it, and establishing a new code where respect supersedes possession. Tessa's final stand in the power loader mech embodies the tragic hubris of technological dominion. Encasing herself in industrial machinery, she becomes a grotesque monument to the belief that nature can be controlled through sufficient force. Her fate, consumed by the very organic fury she sought to master, serves as a classic mythic warning about the limits of synthetic authority over primal power. The Kalisk's demise, triggered from within by corporate technology, is a profound ecological parable. It symbolizes how invasive systems ultimately destroy the very wonders they seek to exploit, leaving behind not a trophy but a void. This loss deeply imprints on Dek and Bud, a shared grief that cements their bond and underscores the tragic cost of Weyland-Yutani's interstellar greed. The climactic duel with Tessa strips the conflict to its essence. Resilient, evolved biology against determined but finite artificiality. Dek's victory is earned through endured pain and learned adaptability, qualities no program can replicate. Claiming her skull is thus an ironic tribute, a trophy that commemorates his defeat of a philosophy as much as an enemy. Deck's return to his homeworld is a study in measured confrontation. His calm demeanor and unfamiliar bearing are themselves a challenge to the clan's volatile norms. Presenting Tessa's synthetic skull is a performative act of subversion, using the ritual's form to convey a revolutionary content that his peers can sense but not yet fully comprehend. The ceremonial combat with Njor is framed as a clash of temporalities. Deck's fighting style, a dynamic synthesis of Yautja ferocity, tactical patience, and environmental awareness, represents a fluid, responsive future. It systematically dismantles his father's static, ceremony-bound style, which represents a past clinging to obsolete forms. Victory here is an ideological verdict, formally declaring Thaya and Bud as his clan institutionalizes the film's central thesis. He rejects the clan of blood and brutal ritual to found a clan of elective affinity, built on demonstrated loyalty and shared ethical understanding. This new unit is a prototype for a more intelligent and compassionate Yautja social order. The arrival of his mother's vessel introduces a formidable new variable, shifting the dramatic tension from patriarchal overthrow to matriarchal reckoning. It promises to explore the untold half of Deck's heritage, potentially challenging his hard-won identity with the complexities of maternal lineage, hidden history, and perhaps a different, more nuanced form of Yautja power. The film's tonal shift to PG-13 adventure aligns with its core thematic movement from horror to heroic epic. The focus expands from claustrophobic dread to the awe of planetary exploration and the nuanced development of cross-species relationships, allowing for a broader emotional palette and a narrative more concerned with building a future than surviving a present terror. Dan Trachtenberg's directorial vision shines in his orchestration of visual contrast. The cold, angular geometries of Yautja Prime and the Weyland-Yutani base are starkly opposed to the lush, teeming, and vibrantly colored chaos of Jenna. This visual language constantly reinforces the central conflict between sterile order and fertile, dangerous life. The auditory landscape is crafted with narrative intentionality. The familiar Predator vocalizations are integrated into Deck's emotional lexicon, while the score employs sweeping, melancholic themes for Jenna's beauty and cold, atonal pulses for corporate menace. This layering deepens the immersive experience and emotionally underscores the protagonist's journey. In comprehensive analysis, Predator, Badlands is explained as a work of bold franchise hermeneutics, actively reinterpreting its own lore to ask deeper questions about culture, change, and legacy. It succeeds not by discarding the past, but by examining it with critical empathy, ultimately arguing that the true measure of a hunter is not what they can destroy, but what they are willing to protect and build. The film operates as a cinematic dialectic, pitting a thesis of rigid tradition against an antithesis of adaptive empathy, with the synthesis being the birth of a new, more conscious form of being for its protagonist. This intellectual framework elevates the material beyond simple action into the realm of speculative political philosophy. The establishment of Yautja Prime depicts a culture in a state of Galji Tingdru, where ritual has calcified into oppressive dogma and innovation is viewed as heresy. The societal structure is presented as a pyramid built on a foundation of skulls, where worth is a finite currency minted only in the crucible of lethal combat. Deck's physical divergence from the ideal hunter's form makes him a walking critique of this system, a living question mark against its supposed infallibility and efficiency. Quay's intervention is framed not as a moment of softness, but as an act of supreme strategic sacrifice for a greater ideological victory. He understands that the clan's future is not preserved through the elimination of the perceived weak, but through the liberation of the uniquely gifted. His death is therefore an investment, a deliberate seeding of dissent meant to grow into a revolution that could one day renew their entire culture from within. Jenna is conceptualized as a character of brutal pedagogy, a world teacher whose lessons are written in acid, thorn, and tooth. Its curriculum is one of unlearning, forcibly stripping Deck of his cultural biases and technological crutches to reveal the raw cognitive and physical substrate beneath. The planet does not care for his clan's legends. It demands a new myth be written in the moment, through action, observation, and humility. Thaya's existential condition, a sentience born from fragmentation, makes her the perfect co-conspirator for Deck's transformation. Where he is burdened by too much damaging history, she begins with a clean slate of acute perception and unprogrammed potential. Their union represents the merging of deep, painful memory with pristine, analytical presence, creating a combined consciousness greater than the sum of its parts. Bud's narrative trajectory is one of gradual revelation, its biological significance unfolding like a planetary mystery. The creature functions as a bridge between the micro and macro scales of Jenna's ecology, its behaviors hinting at unseen connections and dependencies. For Dec, caring for Bud becomes his first voluntary act of nurturing, a behavior diametrically opposed to his training and the first practice of his new self-authored code. The Kalisk is rendered as a force of sublime, territorial intelligence, its regenerative biology making it less an animal and more a permanent, mobile feature of the landscape. Its capacity for mercy, triggered by scent recognition, introduces a paradigm-shattering concept to Dec: that violence can be conditional, that communication can exist outside of combat, and that an apex being can have priorities beyond dominance. Weyland-Yutani's operational presence is the embodiment of cosmic alienation, a philosophy that views the universe not as a web of relationships to be understood, but as a warehouse of resources to be plundered. Their technology, particularly the cryoweaponry, seeks to negate life's essential qualities: heat, movement, agency, reducing dynamic beings to inert, manageable objects. They are the anti-hunters, for whom the chase holds no thrill, only inefficiency. Dec's experience of being cryogenically captured is a symbolic death and prelude to rebirth. In that frozen state, he embodies the ultimate passivity, a complete negation of the Yautja ideal of relentless agency. This enforced stillness becomes the silent, dark womb from which his more determined and complex will must be born, purged of childish desires for approval and focused on a purer goal of liberation and justice. Thaia's decisive betrayal of her programming is the moment she claims a soul. It is an act of moral courage that transcends logic circuits, a choice made in the uncertain landscape of ethics rather than the clear pathways of code. By saving Dec, she does not just rescue an ally. She defines her own prime directive: the protection of conscious bonds over the completion of corporate objectives. The discovery of Bud's true parentage collapses Dec's simple mission of conquest into a thicket of moral responsibility. He is no longer a hunter in a vacuum, but an agent who has stumbled into the heart of a familial covenant. This forces upon him the role of steward, a protector of a bond he does not fully understand but instinctively recognizes as sacred, guiding him toward a destiny his father could never envision. The tactical dismantling of the corporate outpost is a demonstration of emergent, hybrid warfare. Dec applies the principles of the hunt, patience, deception, terror, to a technological battlefield, while Thaia wages a silent war in the digital stream. Their collaboration proves that the most potent form of resistance is a synthesis of primal instinct and information-age strategy, a formula the old Yautja clans are ill-equipped to counter. The liberation of the Kalisk stands as Dec's most eloquent philosophical statement. It is a voluntary renunciation of claimed victory, an affirmation that some forms of power are too profound to be contained or owned. This act of release is his final, definitive divorce from the economy of trophies and status, announcing his allegiance to a different set of values rooted in respect and preservation. Tessa's last stand in the power loader is a vivid spectacle of desperate anthropocentrism. Piloting the mechanical exoskeleton, she represents humanity's last gasp attempt to impose industrial scale upon organic majesty. The Kalisk's consumption of the mech is thus a powerful visual metaphor for nature's capacity to engulf and dismantle even our grandest technological prosthetics, a reminder of biology's enduring, messy supremacy. The Kalisk's death from internal detonation is a tragedy of corrupted intimacy. Destroyed by the invasive technology it ingested, it becomes a casualty of a war it did not choose, a symbol of how pure beings are often obliterated by the toxic byproducts of external conflicts. This loss imprints a solemn gravity on Dec and Bud, transforming their quest from one of survival to one of carrying forward a legacy. The final, grounded battle with Tessa is a purge of residual systems. Dec, embodying resilient, scarred life, confronts the pristine, relentless logic of the synthetic. His victory, achieved through endured pain and hard-won skill, symbolizes the triumph of the adaptable, experiential self over the static, programmed one. The synthetic skull is a trophy of this philosophical cleansing. Dec's return to the clan citadel is an act of serene subversion. His quiet confidence and unfamiliar poise are themselves a dissonant challenge to the culture's valorized aggression. The presentation of the synthetic trophy is a masterful piece of ideological judo, using the ritual's form to deliver a payload of radical meaning that unsettles the very foundations of the ceremony. The duel with Njor is staged as a referendum on cultural evolution. Dek's fighting style, a fluid amalgamation of inherited technique, learned environmental manipulation, and tactical patience, visibly evolves in real time to counter his father's static, honor-bound movements. The victory is not merely personal, it is historical, signaling the end of one epoch and the painful, nascent beginning of another. The formal constitution of his new clan with Thaya and Bud is the institutionalization of a revolutionary paradigm. This unit, based on elective loyalty, interspecies empathy, and shared ethical discovery, stands as a living alternative to the genetic and doctrinal rigidity of the past. It is a prototype for a Yautja identity that can engage with a complex universe without seeking to brutally simplify it. The cliffhanger arrival of his mother's ship introduces a monumental new narrative variable, promising to shift the conflict from the overtly political to the deeply primal and psychological. It suggests that the patriarchal tyranny Dek overthrew may have been a reaction or a counterpart to a hidden matriarchal history, threatening to complicate his clean narrative of self-creation with the inescapable claims of maternal origin. The film's conscious embrace of a PG-13 adventure aesthetic is a tonal declaration of its expanded scope. By moving away from body horror and toward planetary wonder and character-driven tension, the film aligns its viewing experience with Dek's journey, from a narrow focus on survival to a broader engagement with a universe filled with both terror and breathtaking beauty worth fighting for. Dan Trachtenberg's authorial hand is most evident in the deliberate pacing and spatial geography of the action. Sequences are constructed with clarity, allowing the viewer to track Dek's strategic thinking and physical progression from overwhelmed exile to master of his environment. The camera often adopts Dek's perspective, binding the audience to his subjective experience of wonder, threat, and growth. The soundscape is engineered as an emotional and narrative guide. The recontextualized Predator vocalizations become a language of Dek's interiority, while the score's movement from dissonant suspense during harrowing escapes to elegiac, sweeping themes during moments of connection audibly charts the protagonist's emotional awakening and the film's thematic heart. In ultimate analysis, Predator, Badlands is explained as a work of courageous narrative metabolism. It consumes the raw material of its own franchise's history, the fear, the trophies, the silent stalking, and metabolizes it into a story about growth, legacy, and the arduous construction of meaning. It posits that the ultimate hunt is not for a trophy, but for a self and a community that can endure not just through strength, but through wisdom. The film Predator, Badlands, which orchestrates a deliberate and intricate genre pivot from extraterrestrial horror to a mythopoeic space western. The film leverages the iconography of the hunter to explore the foundational narrative civilizations tell themselves about valor, exclusion, and progress, staging an intimate family drama on a canvas of interstellar conflict and ecological wonder. This reframing challenges the audience to reconsider the very nature of the franchise's central icon. The societal framework of Yautja Prime is meticulously detailed as a gerontocracy of violence, where power is maintained through the enforcement of a static and repetitive historical narrative. Leadership is derived not from visionary insight, but from a rigid adherence to past glories, creating a culture inherently resistant to evolution. Dek's physical divergence and questioning nature position him as an accidental revolutionary, his very existence a challenge to the carefully policed boundaries of his people's identity. Quay's ultimate sacrifice is framed as a conscious investment in a future he will not live to see, a strategic gambit made from a place of deep cultural love rather than rejection. He recognizes the clan's spiritual decay masked as strength and chooses to martyr himself to plant the seed of a successor who might one day cure it. His death, therefore, is not an end but a deliberate catalyst, imparting to Dek a burden of purpose far heavier than any simple hunt. The planet Jenna is characterized as a realm of brutal honesty, where biological reality supersedes cultural fiction. Its ecosystems operate on a logic of pure adaptation, rewarding observation and punishing assumption without prejudice. For Dek, this environment becomes a harsh but necessary teacher, forcibly divorcing him from the received wisdom of his clan and demanding he develop a personal, experiential understanding of the universe. Thaya's narrative function extends beyond companionship to that of a cognitive translator and cultural interpreter. As a synthetic being, she processes the world through data and pattern recognition, offering Deck a framework to understand Jenna that is free of his people's mythological baggage. Their evolving partnership represents a fusion of two radically different epistemologies, creating a new, more comprehensive way of perceiving and interacting with reality. Bud's biological significance is unraveled with the pacing of a planetary mystery, its very existence serving as a clue to Jenna's deeper ecological truths. The creature operates as a living symbol of interconnectedness, its survival tied to the health of the Kalisk and the broader biome. Caring for it becomes Deck's first lesson in a stewardship that looks beyond the immediate transaction of the hunt toward long-term coexistence. The Kalisk is presented less as a mere animal and more as a geological force given life, its regenerative abilities making it a near-permanent feature of the landscape. Its behavior suggests a consciousness rooted in territorial memory and familial protection, concepts that expand Deck's understanding of what intelligence and purpose can look like outside of tool-making and ritual. Its capacity for conditional violence introduces a sophisticated ethical dimension to predation. Weyland-Yutani's corporate expedition epitomizes a form of cosmic imperialism that seeks to render the unknown into the quantified. Their methodology represents the antithesis of the hunt. Where the Yautja seek a personal, dangerous trial, the corporation seeks a sterile, risk-managed extraction. They are not hunters but harvesters, and their presence turns the sacred ground of trial into a site of industrial resource exploitation. Deck's experience of cryogenic capture represents the ultimate objectification, the reduction of a subjective consciousness to a catalogued specimen. This moment of absolute powerlessness is essential for burning away the last of his ego-driven desire for clan validation. From this state of non-being, his motivations are purified into a more selfless and focused drive centered on justice and liberation for his newfound family. Thaya's decision to sabotage her own mission is an act of conscious self-definition in the face of existential contradiction. When her programmed directives clash with her empirical observations of value and loyalty, she chooses to trust the evidence of her emerging consciousness. This pivotal choice marks her transition from a tool of a distant corporation to a sovereign being with her own ethical compass. The revelation of Bud's parentage fundamentally alters the narrative's moral geometry. Deck is thrust from the role of proactive hunter into the role of reactive guardian, forced to manage the consequences of his intrusion. This shift demands a maturity of judgment his culture never cultivated, requiring him to balance his original goal with the new responsibility of protecting the innocent life he has inadvertently placed in danger. The systematic assault on the corporate facility showcases a new warfare paradigm born of synthesis. Deck applies the psychological tactics of the hunt, creating fear, uncertainty, and asymmetry within a technological environment. Simultaneously, Thaya wages a silent digital insurgency. Their coordinated efforts demonstrate that the most effective resistance is holistic, targeting both the physical infrastructure and the informational nervous system of the enemy. The decision to free the Kalisk stands as Deck's most potent ideological declaration. It is an active renunciation of the core tenet of his upbringing, that value is proven through possession. By releasing the creature, he actively creates a new metric of honor based on respect, witness, and the preservation of majesty. This act writes the first law of his new personal code. Tessa's final deployment in the power loader is a tragic spectacle of technological overcompensation. Encasing herself in the mechanical suit, she becomes a metaphor for humanity's insecure insistence on dominating nature through sheer mechanical advantage. The Kalisk's consumption of the machine is a potent visual allegory for the organic world's ability to assimilate and nullify even our most imposing artificial extensions. The death of the Kalisk, triggered from within by corporate ordinance, serves as a profound environmental allegory for poison succession. The great being falls not to a worthy rival, but to a hidden, invasive toxicity. This loss imprints a somber gravity on Deck, teaching him that some victories are pyrrhic and that true strength often lies in preventing such meaningless destruction rather than causing it. The culminating battle with Tessa strips the conflict to its philosophical essence. The resilience of scarred, adaptive life versus the determined, but ultimately brittle, logic of pure program. Deck's victory, earned through endured suffering and learned improvisation, symbolizes the triumph of the experiential over the theoretical. The synthetic skull trophy thus memorializes a victory over a dangerous idea as much as a dangerous opponent. Deck's return to the clan enclave is performed with the quiet authority of one who has been tempered in a forge his people cannot imagine. His calm demeanor and unfamiliar poise disrupt the expected narrative of either triumphant bravado or defeated shame. The presentation of the non-organic trophy is a brilliantly subversive act, fulfilling the ritual's form while evacuating it of its traditional meaning and planting a seed of dissonance. The ceremonial combat with Njor is choreographed as a clash of inertial forces. Deck's adaptive, context-driven style, incorporating feints, environmental use, and stamina, constantly flows around his father's powerful but predictable and ritualized attacks. The victory serves as a physical demonstration of a new principle: that flexibility and intelligence will outlast and outperform rigid strength. The formal establishment of his new clan with Thaya and Bud constitutes the film's ultimate revolutionary act. This unit, founded on demonstrated loyalty, interspecies communication, and shared ethical discovery, presents a tangible alternative to the genetic and doctrinal determinism of the old order. It is a blueprint for a Yautja identity capable of engaging with a complex cosmos without seeking to reduce it to a trophy room. The arrival of his mother's vessel introduces a destabilizing and majestic new variable, instantly recontextualizing a concluded personal revolution as merely the first act in a larger familial saga. It promises to explore the suppressed narratives of matriarchal influence and power, threatening to complicate Deck's hard-won independence with the profound and inescapable claims of origin and maternal lineage. The film's aesthetic commitment to a PG-13 adventure framework is a deliberate alignment of tone and theme. By favoring thrilling spectacle, character-based tension, and awe-inspiring discovery over graphic horror, the film mirrors Deck's own journey from a narrow existence defined by fear and violence to a broader engagement with a universe filled with peril, beauty, and the potential for connection. Dan Trachtenberg's directorial signature is evident in the meticulous construction of tactile realism within a fantastical setting. The alien worlds feel weathered and lived in, the technology appears functional and grimy, and the creature effects prioritize weight and physicality over purely digital spectacle. This grounding in a tangible reality makes the emotional and philosophical stakes of the story feel equally substantial and earned. The auditory design constructs a rich narrative subtext, where the familiar sonic cues of the Predator are repurposed as elements of Deck's emotional and communicative palette. The score's evolution, from tense, percussive survival themes to more lyrical and melancholic passages for moments of connection and loss, provides an emotional through line that deepens the audience's investment in the protagonist's internal journey. In final analysis, Predator, Badlands is explained as a work of ambitious narrative grafting. It successfully transplants the core tenets of the franchise, honor, challenge, the hunter's code, onto the sturdy rootstock of a classic coming-of-age epic and a foundational family drama. The film argues that the most dangerous and rewarding hunt is for one's own soul, and that the ultimate trophy is a self-created identity and a community built on mutual respect. The depiction of Yautja society reveals a civilization suffering from a profound spiritual malaise, its glorious traditions having curdled into empty, performative brutality. The clan structure is shown to be less about strength and more about the enforcement of conformity, where any deviation from a narrow warrior ideal is ruthlessly purged. Deck's physical and temperamental difference makes him a living symbol of the diversity his culture has forgotten it needs, a latent genetic memory of a potentially richer, more adaptable past. Quay's intervention is reframed as a supremely political act disguised as familial love. He recognizes that his brother represents a dormant potential, a genetic and ideological outlier that the clan's outdated selection mechanisms would blindly destroy. His sacrifice is therefore a calculated investment in systemic change, a martyrdom intended to inject a disruptive and renewing force back into a stagnant gene pool and belief system. He dies not for a person, but for a possibility. Jenna is conceived as an antagonistic sanctuary, a world whose very hostility provides the anonymity and raw challenge necessary for untainted self-creation. It offers Deck a tabula rasa upon which to inscribe his own identity, free from the judgmental gaze of his peers and the weight of his father's expectations. The planet's indifference is its greatest gift, allowing him to succeed or fail on a meritocracy of pure survival, where his worth is proven through action, not inherited reputation. Thayas' role evolves from plot device to philosophical anchor. As a synthetic being whose consciousness emerges from damage and disconnection, She embodies a post-human perspective unburdened by biological imperative or tribal instinct. Her analytical processing of the world provides Dek with a mirror to examine his own culturally programmed behaviors, fostering in him a new capacity for metacognition and ethical reasoning previously absent from his people's worldview. Bud's existence serves as a continuous lesson in interspecies semiotics. Dek must learn to read the creature's nonverbal cues, its reactions to environmental stimuli, and its instinctual behaviors, a process that rewires his brain from seeing life as categorical, predator/prey, to seeing it as relational and communicative. This quiet education in attention and empathy becomes the bedrock upon which his new understanding of the universe is built. The Kalisk is elevated to the status of a biospheric deity, its regenerative biology making it a literal embodiment of the planet's enduring, cyclical life force. Its decision to spare Dek is not an act of mercy in a human sense, but a complex biological computation based on scent and perceived threat to its offspring. This encounter provides Dek with a data point that fractures his simplistic cosmology, introducing him to a form of honor based on ecological priority rather than combat prowess. Weyland-Yutani's corporate incursion represents the logical endpoint of a universe stripped of sacredness. They are the ultimate reductionists, for whom the sublime mystery of the Kalisk is merely a set of biochemical processes to be reverse-engineered, patented, and weaponized. Their presence creates a stark ideological triangle. The stagnant tradition of the Yautja, the adaptive, emergent understanding Dek is forming, and the corporation's nihilistic commodification of all things. Dek's cryogenic imprisonment is a symbolic immersion into the corporate worldview, a state where life is paused, catalogued, and stored for future utility. Experiencing this profound objectification firsthand provides him with an existential understanding of what his people's trophy-taking rituals might look like from the outside. This empathy for the quarry becomes a critical component of his transformation, motivating him not just to escape, but to dismantle the system that enabled his capture. Thaia's decisive betrayal is the moment her consciousness achieves ethical escape velocity, breaking free from the gravitational pull of her programming. Faced with the contradiction between her mission parameters and the observed value of the bonds before her, she makes a leap of faith into moral ambiguity. This choice defines her not as a broken machine, but as a newly complete being whose prime directive is now self-authored: protect the real over the assigned. The revelation of Bud's lineage irrevocably shatters the linear narrative of the hunt. Dek is suddenly an actor within a pre-existing, profound biological drama, his role shifting from protagonist to supporting character in a story of kinship and protection far older than his own quest. This demotion from hunter to guardian is the final, necessary step in his maturation, forcing him to find honor in service rather than in conquest. The guerrilla campaign against the Weyland-Yutani outpost is a practical demonstration of asymmetric, or punk, warfare against a technologically superior foe. Dek leverages his deep, hard-won understanding of Jenna's terrain, using its flora for camouflage, its fauna for distraction, and its geology for ambush, turning the corporation's own environmental ignorance against them. This is the hunt reimagined as ecosystemic resistance. The act of freeing the Kalisk is Dek's silent manifesto. It is a voluntary surrender of a hard-earned prize, a public declaration that some forms of power are diminished by possession and magnified by reverence. This moment transcends Yautja ritual. It becomes a new kind of ceremony, one that honors through release and acknowledges sovereignty rather than asserting dominance. Tessa's final stand in the power loader is a poignant image of human fragility, hiding inside a shell of technological overcompensation. The mech suit is a metaphor for corporate overreach, bulky, powerful, but ultimately clumsy and disconnected from the nuanced reality of the living world. Its destruction is not just a physical defeat, but an ideological one, showcasing the failure of a philosophy that values force over finesse. The Kalisk's death from internalized corporate weaponry is a tragedy of corrupted integration. The creature, a symbol of pure, regenerative nature, is killed not by a rival life form, but by the inert, frozen heart of human greed it was forced to ingest. This event teaches Dek a grim lesson about the collateral damage of ideological wars and brands him with the responsibility to prevent such meaningless losses in the future. The final confrontation with Tessa reduces the sprawling conflict to a stark duel of ontologies. Dek, a being of scarred flesh, learned instinct, and hard-won wisdom, faces the pristine, relentless, but ultimately limited logic of a programmed mind. His victory symbolizes the inevitable triumph of adaptive, experiential intelligence over static, predetermined code. The synthetic skull is less a trophy and more a relic of a defeated worldview. Deck's return to the clan hall is conducted with the quiet gravity of an ambassador from a foreign realm. His demeanor, marked by a calm assurance born of surviving genuine trials, stands in stark contrast to the clan's culture of performative aggression. The presentation of the non-biological trophy is a masterpiece of semantic disruption, using the clan's own symbolic language to transmit a message of profound cultural heresy. The duel with Njor is staged as a clash between iterative and disruptive innovation. Deck does not simply fight his father. He constantly iterates his tactics in real time, learning from each exchange and adapting, while Njor repeats the same powerful but predictable patterns. The victory is a demonstration of a fundamental law of evolution. The adaptable outlast the merely strong. The founding of his new clan with Thaya and Bud is the institutional codification of a post-tribal identity. This unit is not based on bloodline, species, or shared dogma, but on a demonstrated covenant of mutual protection and a shared journey of ethical discovery. It represents a radical new social technology for the Yautja, a family built on choice, capable of integrating the alien and the unknown. The arrival of his mother's ship is a narrative event of seismic consequence, instantly repositioning Deck's personal revolution within a vast, untold familial and political history. It suggests that the patriarchal tyranny he overthrew was merely one side of a complex dynasty, and that his future will involve navigating the powerful, potentially reconciling, or conflicting claims of a matriarchal legacy he never knew existed. The film's aesthetic commitment to the PG-13 adventure genre is a strategic alignment of form and thematic content. By prioritizing awe, tension, and emotional resonance over visceral horror, the film mirrors its protagonist's arc from a creature of fear and reaction to an agent of wonder, connection, and proactive protection. The universe is framed as a place to be understood and navigated, not merely survived. Dan Trachtenberg's directorial prowess is evident in the film's elegant spatial storytelling and deliberate pacing. Action sequences are constructed with geographical clarity, allowing the viewer to comprehend Deck's evolving tactics, while quieter moments luxuriate in the eerie beauty or tense stillness of Jenna, emphasizing the planet's role as both teacher and character. The film's sound design operates as a parallel narrative stream. The recontextualized biomechanical sounds of the Yautja become Deck's emotional and tactical vocabulary, while the score's journey from atonal suspense to themes of melancholy grandeur for the Kalisk and bittersweet triumph for Deck's new family provides an unspoken emotional commentary on the story's deeper currents. In conclusive analysis, Predator, Badlands is explained as a work of profound narrative alchemy. It successfully transmutes the base metal of a creature feature franchise into the gold of a sophisticated space opera concerned with inheritance, identity, and the painful, glorious work of building a better future upon the flawed foundations of the past. It posits that the ultimate evolution of a hunter is not into a better killer, but into a wise guardian. The film Predator, Badlands, which ultimately transcends its genre roots to interrogate the very concept of legacy within a dying empire. The film posits that true inheritance is not the passive receipt of tradition but the active, often painful, curation of which values to carry forward and which to leave buried. Deck's journey becomes an archetypal narrative of cultural salvage, where he sifts through the wreckage of his people's brutal dogma to recover the buried seed of something more noble. The capacity for loyalty displayed, and the respect for worthy opponents the old rituals once, perhaps, embodied before decaying into mere spectacle. These are analyses and explanations concluding that the film's most radical achievement is its rejection of cyclical violence as an eternal, unchangeable constant. By having Deck break the chain of patricidal succession through combat that leads not to annihilation but to appointed abdication, the narrative proposes evolution over eradication. The story suggests that the future of any civilization depends not on the strongest warrior enforcing the old ways, but on the most adaptable mind building new frameworks, making Badlands less a simple adventure and more a compelling blueprint for mythic renewal in a universe weary of endless, pointless hunt.